A 92-year-old beggar asked for food at a restaurant, but no one wanted to help him. However, the rich woman was horrified to see the watch on his wrist, and if she had not knocked on the door of the cafe known for its handmade sandwiches and strong coffee, the old man would have walked in, drawing the eyes of customers and employees alike. He was thin and unkempt, with messy snow-white hair. He wore ragged clothes that carried the penetrating smell of unknown places and many nights spent outdoors. The fabric of his clothes was faded and worn due to the harsh conditions he lived in, hanging loosely from his body, and his pants were patched in many places, showing signs of handmade repairs. There were worn-out shoes on his feet, his face was streaked with sunlight, and there was a wild, desperate determination in his eyes. His name was Xavier. With trembling hands, Xavier walked towards the counter of the cafe, trying not to attract attention, although it was difficult. Discreet glances and distrustful whispers from customers filled the air with tension. But he still focused on what he came for. He opened his fingers and revealed several coins, his lips whispering numbers as if each one carried the weight of a life decision. He studied the cheapest items on the menu, calculating how much he could buy. The owner of the cafe, Nubia, watched him closely. She always stood behind the counter, easily recognizable by her stained apron. Her expression was always serious, and smiles were reserved only for customers she felt had clear purchasing power. Finally, the man looked up, his eyes reflecting a faint glimmer of hope, and asked in a raspy, tired voice, "Cheapest sandwich, ma'am." Before we continue with the story, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to us. Also, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We're asking this because Xavier bowed his head, counting the coins again with his dirty fingers, arranging them one by one on the counter, slowly forming a small pile. When he realized he didn't have enough money for any item, his wrinkled face revealed a flash of despair. With a trembling voice, he said, "Please, do you have any leftovers you could give me?" he asked almost inaudibly. "I'm very hungry," Xavier said, looking at Nubia. "We don't keep leftovers here. It's a cafe, not a shelter. We don't have anything for you," Nubia replied coldly, barely hiding her annoyance. "Just some food, please." Xavier's eyes were large and worried, and his voice was getting weaker and weaker. Nubia was even more annoyed by the unpleasant smell that Xavier had brought with him and by the whispers of disapproval from the customers. "For God's sake, we came here to eat in peace, not listen to stinking people asking for food. Go away," one customer said, irritated. "Yes, it's inconvenient. Why don't you go ask somewhere else?" another customer replied contemptuously. Devastated but not surprised, Xavier felt the weight of the world fall on his shoulders, but he couldn't move, hoping someone would help him. At this point, when the conversation had become a little heated, Graciela, a woman in her 40s dressed in an elegant suit, entered the cafe. Her style and posture suggested success and wealth, traits that were not lost on Nubia, who immediately changed her aggressive tone so as not to attract the attention of her new client. Graciela was a well-known businesswoman in the city, the owner of a series of luxury boutiques, and her presence in the cafe was a rare event. Nubia continued her sarcastic remarks to Xavier, while Graciela sat down at one of the tables to order food while being served by one of the staff. She soon noticed an unpleasant interaction between Nubia and Xavier while some customers watched. "Sir, I already told you, we don't get anything for free. Please leave," Nubia said with a look of disgust, breathing deeply, wanting to get out of the situation. "It's a cafe, not a charity center. If you can't pay, I can't do anything for you," she concluded. "I really just wanted something to eat," Xavier said, hanging his head, almost giving up. After placing her order, Graciela interrupted the conversation to express her outrage at how Xavier was treated. "I'll pay for this gentleman's lunch," she said firmly, turning to Nubia. She then asked, "Who owns this place?" "It's me, ma'am. My name is Nubia, and I'm sorry for what's happening here." "It's not usual that we serve people like this," Nubia couldn't finish because Graciela had already intervened. "You don't serve people like that?" "Nubia, I have something important to tell you," she said in a serious tone for everyone to hear, including the needy man in front of her. "We meet many people in our daily lives, and each of them has their own struggles and challenges. The way we choose to treat each of them says a lot about who we are. Did you know that?" Graciela continued seriously. "I understand, my lady, but it's difficult when—" Nubia's voice trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging as Graciela seemed to want to interrupt again. "It would be difficult if you could imagine yourself in the place of people like this gentleman, or even your clients, who seem to have a comfortable life. Imagine how strong this gentleman must have been to ask for help. We must be people who empower others, not those who push others down. Do you understand? Graciela said firmly. I'm sorry. The customers were irritated and Nubia tried to justify herself, but her voice faded again and Graciela continued, You think about those who come often, and you know they will have money to pay for everything. We all have our learning moments, Nubia. Today was one of those days. Let's try to be more empathetic, and maybe we can make the world a little better place for everyone, because not everyone has the same opportunities. Now give this gentleman everything he needs and I will pay, she said, turning her gaze to the old man with great empathy. Xavier thanked her very much and ordered dinner. However, as Xavier took his lunch and turned to leave, Graciela noticed something on his wrist, a watch that seemed very familiar because of the drawing on the side. Sir, please wait a moment, Graciela asked firmly. Tell me, where did you get that watch you're wearing? She asked, examining the watch with an expression of disbelief. Nubia, with bad intentions, also asked Xavier, I would like to know too, this watch seems expensive for someone like you, don't you think? Answer the lady before I call the police, Nubia said with a suspicious look on her face. The discussion aroused the curiosity of everyone in the cafe. However, Graciela was oblivious to the tumult around her, her eyes remaining focused on the watch, and before Xavier responded, memories of the watch's origins began to flood her mind. These memories brought back a painful past when she had to start over at the beginning of her adult life after losing 2 loved ones at the same time. Graciela grew up in an orphanage where she never knew her real parents. Although she was never adopted, the love she received at the orphanage satisfied that lack. When she was a teenager and smart enough to understand life better, she learned that her father had died of an overdose when she was still an infant, and her mother had left her on the doorstep of an orphanage. Despite these challenges, she developed into a healthy and happy girl. It was Martina, an orphanage employee who was over 50 years old and had worked at the institution for many years, who told Graciela about her parents. Her eyes saw many things, and when she met Graciela, she felt empathy and pity for her, another abandoned child. From the moment Graciela was admitted to the orphanage, Martina, who had a big heart, became close to the girl and the two developed an emotional bond. For Graciela, although she had a tragic background, the orphanage was the only home she knew. The atmosphere, although simple, was always filled with the constant love of the employees who became family to her. Martina, always wearing glasses on the tip of her nose and with a smile that rarely left her face, became a motherly figure to Graciela. She soon recognized the girl's cleverness and devoted herself to supporting her every step in her development, celebrating her small victories and comforting her beyond compare, patiently explaining life lessons that went beyond the school curriculum, teaching her about perseverance, kindness, and the importance of pursuing her dreams. When Graciela was already 17, she helped Martina at the orphanage, taking care of the children and organizing tasks such as meals and collecting donations. The orphanage was often visited by amateur artists who worked as volunteers, bringing donations and joy. Visits with donations and performances were common on weekends. A theater group visited the orphanage every month, presenting stories that emphasized the importance of teamwork and appreciating people. Graciela always knew about the visit in advance, as the group arranged the date to learn about the orphanage's needs, making these days highly anticipated by the children. During one of these visits, a young 20-year-old Emmanuel came with a theater group to bring donations to the orphanage and watch his friends perform. He fell in love with Graciela, who quickly took the donations and went to organize them in a small room set aside for this purpose. When Graciela's eyes met Emmanuel's for the first time, there was an instant connection, one of those rare moments of mutual recognition that seem orchestrated by fate. Emmanuel was impressed by Graciela's charisma and maturity, while she felt drawn to his kindness and genuine interest in the well-being of the children at the orphanage. After that day, Emmanuel made sure to visit the orphanage more often under the pretense of bringing more donations, although obviously with the intention of seeing Graciela. The two began to talk regularly, sharing dreams, laughter, and ultimately trust. Friendship quickly turned into passion and then into love, a deep feeling full of promises of a future together. One day, when Emmanuel showed up with more donations, his heart was full of hope. Graciela, I really like being here with you. I know we can't have a relationship here, but I want you to know that I will be waiting for you until you leave, he said with a wide smile, looking into her eyes. It makes me shudder to think that this year I will be released from the orphanage and that I will have a wonderful man by my side, she replied shyly, almost in a whisper. So where are you going? Where are you going to live? He asked impatiently. I'm staying with a lady named Guadalupe. She's Martina's friend. Guadalupe is a seamstress and knows a boutique owner who needs a saleswoman. So I have a place to live and even a job, she replied with a wide smile. That's great. Give me your address, phone number, and any contacts you can give me, he said, smiling. Can I come the day you leave to pick you up and take you to Guadalupe's house? He asked impatiently, waiting for an answer. Of course, that you can, darling, she replied with a smile. I'll need a guide, and for now you and Martina are the only ones I trust to guide me through life outside the orphanage, she replied thoughtfully. Graciela told Martina that she liked Emmanuel. Though Martina warned her to be careful, she blessed their relationship, seeing how Emmanuel treated Graciela with love and respect during his visits, always supervised by Martina. When Graciela celebrated her 18th birthday, Emmanuel was full of hope, knowing that this day meant the beginning of a new phase in their lives. He arrived at the orphanage with a bouquet of flowers in his hands, each petal reflecting his expectation and joy. Graciela, waiting for him, saw him through the window and felt her heart beat faster. The emotions were palpable. Happy birthday, Graciela. Today is a big day, Emmanuel said excitedly upon seeing her, handing her the bouquet. Ah, Emmanuel, they are beautiful. Thank you, Graciela replied, accepting the flowers with tears of happiness in her eyes. After saying goodbye to Martina, the other workers, and the children, Graciela said, "See you later," promising to return to visit the orphanage. Emmanuel took Graciela to her new home, the home of Martina's friend Guadalupe, so she could start her life outside the orphanage. When they arrived, Guadalupe, a plump woman with an apron and a gentle expression, was already waiting for Graciela. Guadalupe was very accommodating, saying that she always welcomed young people into her home at Martina's request, so that they would have a place to stay and start a new life. After Emmanuel said goodbye, promising to return later to take her to dinner, Graciela spent the entire evening talking to Guadalupe. You have a very good heart. I thank God for meeting wonderful people in my life. Graciela thanked with a smile on her face. A few months later, when Graciela was employed as a saleswoman and had Guadalupe's support, she felt fulfilled. Her relationship with Emmanuel was strong and was about to enter a new phase, which unfortunately brought a lot of suffering for Graciela. One cool Sunday morning, Emmanuel picked up Graciela to take her to his home and introduce her to his mother, Ivana. Emmanuel's mother has always been a person of strong beliefs and high expectations, especially regarding the life of her only son. After the divorce, she lived alone with Emmanuel, becoming more withdrawn and critical, focusing much of her attention on her son's well-being and decisions. When they reached Emmanuel's house, Ivana gave Graciela a disapproving look when she learned that the girl was poor and came from an orphanage. Her insensitive comments disturbed Emmanuel. "Mom, please treat Graciela with respect. You know I will stay with her regardless of your prejudices," Emmanuel said after taking his mother to talk in another room. "Really, son? A girl who came from an orphanage? I expected more from you, Emmanuel, but if that's what you want, then fine, just don't bring her here again." "I don't want people like that in my house," she replied, Ivana, already going to her room. "You can rest assured, because I will soon be moving out to live with her, and we won't bother you anymore," Emmanuel revealed, returning to the table to eat dinner with Graciela. Ivana was shocked to hear these words, as she always feared this might happen. Being divorced, she only had Emmanuel to accompany her. This made Ivana feel even more angry towards Graciela. A few weeks later, Emmanuel acted with determination when he learned of an available apartment in his building. He decided to invite Graciela to live with him. Graciela, although surprised, felt that this was a natural evolution of their relationship. She accepted the invitation with joy and hope, looking forward to a new phase of her life with Emmanuel, carrying with her the values and love that Martina and the other orphanage workers had given her. When they arrived at the apartment, Emmanuel handed Graciela the key, wanting her to feel at home. She opened the door and felt incredibly happy to finally have a home and loved to share her life with. The next day, Emmanuel and Graciela were preparing breakfast while waiting for Ivana's first visit, as Emmanuel insisted on inviting her out of respect, even though she did not support their relationship due to Graciela's origins. Once she arrived at the couple's new apartment, Ivana tried to be more cordial, but her true impressions of Graciella's origins quickly began to reveal themselves. "It's amazing how you organize everything here, Graciella. For someone who grew up in an orphanage without parents, it's fine, although it needs repairs," Ivana said, looking around Graciella and Emmanuel's house with a slightly arrogant tone. "I've learned a lot from the people who took care of me, Mrs. Ivana. They were my family and taught me the value of home," Graciella replied, trying to remain calm and respectful. The visits became tense moments for Graciella, who tried to show her worth and prove that her past as an orphan did not define her ability to be a good partner for Emanuela. Ivana, on the other hand, seemed to be observing every detail, looking for flaws to justify her doubts. "Interesting. That color choice, Graciella," Ivana said on another visit, commenting on the decoration. "It's not something I would have chosen. That someone who grew up in an orphanage doesn't understand good taste or elegance," she said, making snide remarks in her comment. "We each bring our own experiences to life, Ms. Ivana. I appreciate the diversity that my past has provided me," Graciella replied firmly but kindly. Emmanuel, seeing the growing tension between the two most important women in his life, felt torn. He loved his mother, but he wasn't ready to give up his relationship with Graciella just to please Ivana. "Mom, I already told you, don't insult Graciella, especially in our house." "I really don't understand what you have against her, but whatever it is, keep it to yourself," Emmanuel said, showing his dissatisfaction in a private conversation with his mother. "Son, I don't care about this woman. My only concern is you and your future. I see this woman as an opportunist. Considering she lived in an orphanage and had nowhere to go a year ago, she now lives with you." "Open your eyes before it's too late," Ivana replied, twisting the facts. "Do you realize what you're saying? Do you know Graciella's history to insinuate such things, Mother? Please go to your apartment and don't come back here if you're going to mistreat Graciella again," Emmanuel concluded, impatient. Although Ivana stopped visiting after this conversation, she still made snide and prejudiced comments when she met the couple on other occasions because they lived in the same building. She saw only flaws in Graciella, believing that the young woman was taking advantage of her son. Over time, Graciella unexpectedly became pregnant. The couple was scared at first, but they decided to face the situation together and have a child, seeing it as a new chapter that would bring more purpose and love to their lives. This decision made them vulnerable to judgment, especially from Ivana, who no longer supported her son's relationship. When she learned the news, her face immediately tensed and her brows furrowed, struggling to process the couple's words. "Do you really think you're ready to raise a child? Haven't you realized that this irresponsibility could destroy Emmanuel's future?" Ivana said in a stern tone, looking at Graciella. "Mom, this is something we decided together. We know it wasn't the perfect moment, but we will raise this child with love and devotion," Emmanuel said firmly, trying to remain calm. "And you, girl, won't say anything? You planned this as an excuse to catch Emmanuel, right? Turning your mistake into an unwavering commitment? I know people like you," Ivana accused, pointing her finger at the young woman. "I would never do something like that, Ms. Ivana," Graciella said, holding back tears. "Emmanuel is my partner because we chose to be together. I would never take advantage of anyone. And as for the baby, it really was a surprise to us, but we take it as a blessing," she finished, wiping away the tears that were already falling. "A blessing? How can you see it as a blessing? Emmanuel had a promising career ahead of him and you ruin it," Ivana said, snorting contemptuously. "Don't blame Graciella, Mom. She didn't ruin anything here. We are responsible together and this baby is not a mistake. Stop trying to create intrigues, Mom, for God's sake," Emmanuel intervened in a louder voice. "So of course you will defend her, but that doesn't change the reality. Children are a huge responsibility and you are not ready for it," Ivana said sternly. "Miss Ivana, we may not have all the answers right now, but we know that we will work hard to give this baby the best life possible. I work too, madam, and I have the support of my manager who already knows that I am pregnant. I hope that in time you will see beyond your criticisms and support us," Graciella said, breathing deeply, trying to stay calm. "They can try all they want, but life will not obey your naive desires," Ivana replied, reluctant. "We'll see how long this optimism lasts," she concluded. Over time, Ivana continued her snide remarks, often making Graciela uncomfortable during visits, making sure to emphasize the cost of raising a child, the impact on Emmanuel's career, and even implying that Graciela would not be a good mother because she came from an orphanage. "Are you sure you know what you're doing? Remember, baby needs stability. I hope you're thinking about how you're going to provide that," Ivana said during the visit, watching Graciela organize the crib. "I think about it every day, my lady. I do my best to prepare everything. Remember, I have been around small children and I know what a child needs," Graciela replied patiently. "That's good, but planning and doing are two different things. Let's see how you handle it when things get difficult, girl," Ivana replied in an argumentative tone. "Mom, enough is enough. Graciela is doing her best. We need your support, not more criticism," said Emmanuel, tired of the discussion. Even though Ivana tried to sow discord, she was unable to destroy the bond that united the couple, although her words left wounds that needed time to heal. A few months later, a tragic event made the situation even worse. Emmanuel and Graciela made an appointment with the doctor for an ultrasound. It was one of those moments that future parents wait with impatience and joy to see the image of their developing child. They left the house with wide smiles, exchanging hopeful glances and talking about plans for the new addition to the family. The scan went great, and they were both delighted to hear the baby's heartbeat and see his little figure on the ultrasound screen. With hearts full of joy, they left the clinic and took a taxi to go home, continuing to talk about the children's names and how they would organize the children's room. As the taxi was approaching a busy intersection, a car traveling at high speed, whose driver lost control, unexpectedly drove into the side of the taxi where Graciela was sitting. The impact was violent and sudden, transforming a day of celebration into a scene of horror. The taxi was thrown off the road and the accident left a trail of shattered glass and twisted metal in its wake. Immediately after the accident, passers-by rushed to help, calling ambulances and trying to comfort Graciela and Emmanuel, both of whom were visibly shaken and injured. Graciela, in a state of shock, could barely comprehend what had happened, her mind still trying to process the rapid change from joy to desperation. Ambulance sirens soon rang through the air, interrupting the chaos of traffic and the concerned voices around her. Paramedics arrived on scene quickly, moving with efficiency to assess the injuries and prepare Graciela and Emmanuel for urgent transport to hospital. Graciela was carefully placed on a stretcher, still in shock, while paramedics tried to stabilize her during transport. Emmanuel, seriously injured, was attended to by another team, each quickly transported to the nearest hospital. In the hospital, doctors and nurses moved quickly, focusing on essential emergency care. Graciela felt like a spectator. Everything seemed distant and unreal. A terrifying sense of calm came over her, mixing fear and physical pain as she waited for news of her and Emmanuel's condition, fearing the worst. Finally, a doctor approached with a serious expression, his words falling on her soul like hammers. "We are very sorry, Graciela, but you have lost your child, and Emmanuel is in critical condition." The words resonated in her head, each syllable like a knife strike, splitting her heart into pieces. She felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet, leaving her in a bottomless pit of pain and despair. The dream of a new life, the joy of bringing into the world some of the love she and Emmanuel shared, all of it was torn from her in an instant. Later that day, as Graciela lay in a hospital bed trying to recover not only from her physical injuries but also from the emotional shock of the loss of her baby and Emmanuel's critical condition, the silence of her room was suddenly broken by the unexpected arrival of Ivana. Depressed and in pain, she couldn't keep calm. The door to the room flew open and Ivana stormed in, her quick and heavy footsteps echoing in the silence. Graciela, still weak and shaken, looked up, meeting Ivana's fiery gaze. "It's your fault, wicked one. If it weren't for you, my son wouldn't be in this condition and my grandson would be alive. Are you happy now?" Ivana shouted, expressing her anger. Graciela, not having the strength to confront her, felt the weight of Ivana's words like physical blows. She tried to answer, her voice barely coming out as a whisper. "Ivana, I never wanted this. It was an accident. I lost my baby too," Graciela replied weakly, trying to hold back her tears. "Don't say anything. You were always irresponsible. You came from an orphanage and you never had a real family to raise you. You came into my son's life out of nowhere, took advantage of him, and now look what happened. How can you live with yourself knowing that you destroyed my family? You wicked!" Ivana screamed, her voice increasing in volume and desperation. Meanwhile, the nurse tried to intervene, moving closer to try to calm Ivana and give Graciela space to breathe. "Madam, please, you need to calm down. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave. She's also injured and needs rest," the nurse said, standing between Ivana and Graciela. Ivana, breathing heavily, cast one last contemptuous glance at Graciela and, at the nurse's insistence, left the room, still muttering hard words. Graciela, left alone in the silence of her hospital room, she closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely. Her heart was torn to pieces. A few days later, Graciela was discharged after making a full recovery, but Emmanuel, who had suffered a serious head injury, remained in a critical condition and in a coma. Graciela returned to the hospital almost every day to visit him, remaining by her companion's side waiting for any sign of recovery. Unfortunately, fate was cruel. Emmanuel did not survive his injuries and died, which plunged Graciela into a deep state of depression. She arrived at the funeral with her head bowed and her eyes swollen, devastated by the loss of the two most important people in her life, her child and Emmanuel. Ivana was on alert, her eyes full of hatred, when she saw Graciela trying to approach the coffin. She approached her aggressively. "What are you doing here, wicked one?" Ivana grabbed Graciela's arm. "I just want to say goodbye to Emmanuel, please," Graciela said with tears in her eyes. "Oh, do you really think you have this right? You shouldn't be here, you wicked one. My son doesn't deserve your tears. He's lying in this coffin because of you. Get out of here. I don't want to see your face again." Ivana gritted her teeth out of anger. "Ivana, please, I just want a moment to say goodbye." "That's all I'm asking," Graciela said, crying. "I don't want to hear another word you say. Get out now." Ivana pointed to the door and said no more. Humiliated and thrown out, Graciela left the funeral with her mind and heart in pieces. She left the place, leaning against the walls due to the weakness in her body, as if she was carrying the world on her shoulders. She couldn't even say goodbye to the man she loved so much, choked by the pain of the tragedy that had destroyed her. Ivana's accusations resonated in her mind, poisoning her thoughts as she desperately searched for some trace of peace. Over time, Graciela fell into complete darkness and withdrew from the world, trying to process everything that had happened. But Ivana's unfair guilt hanging over her made her grief even more lonely and bitter. And she stayed like that for some time, with the doors of her apartment and heart closed. But not for long. She was depressed, but now she could breathe better. She believed that if she survived, it was because she had to move on. One sunny day, she woke up determined to start over. She decided to move from this apartment in the province to start a new life in the capital. After the tragedy that changed her life, Graciela decided to use the savings she had accumulated at Emmanuel's request. This money, the fruit of her hard work as a saleswoman before the accident, became the foundation for the new life she decided to build in the capital. Thanks to these savings, Graciela managed to rent a small apartment, her own place, where she could begin to heal the wounds of the past and look to the future with some hope. The area where her new apartment was located was close to several luxury boutiques, and it was in one of these stores that Graciela saw an opportunity to restart her career. Recalling her skills and passion for fashion, she did not hesitate to apply for a position as a saleswoman in one of the most prestigious boutiques in the area. Thanks to her previous experience and natural ability to connect with customers, Graciela quickly landed a job. Working at a luxury boutique gave her not only financial stability, but also the opportunity to get involved in an environment she already loved. Over time, Graciela decided to study management and, recognizing her talent and dedication, Elena, the owner of the boutique, offered to cover half of the study costs. Elena saw her not only as an exceptional salesperson, but also as a future leader in her business. Graciela accepted the offer with gratitude and determination and soon began her studies. During her studies, Graciela became deeply immersed in the study of business management, marketing, finance, and operations. It was in this enriching academic environment that Graciela met Arthur. He was also in the same management program, but focused specifically on entrepreneurship and sustainability. Arthur saw in Graciela a woman who was not only determined and capable, but also deeply committed to her values and vision of the future. Growing closer as they took a leisurely walk around campus, Arthur and Graciela walked side by side, enjoying the fresh breeze that heralded the changing of the seasons. It was then that Arthur decided it was the perfect time to express his feelings. "Graciela, we've spent a lot of time together these past few days, and every moment has been incredibly special to me. Arthur confessed, grabbing her hands a little nervously. To me too, Artur. You're a great boyfriend, Graciela replied, smiling as she looked into his eyes. You know, ever since I met you, I have felt drawn not only to your intelligence or beauty, but also to your sweetness and the way you talk about your roots with such passion and honesty. You inspire me, Graciela, said Arthur in love. Ah, Arthur, Graciela said sheepishly. I'm just trying to be honest about who I am and where I come from. It means a lot to me that you appreciate it, she replied, breathing deeply. Just because I think so, I would really like to know, Arthur said, shaking her hands lovingly. Graciela, would you like to be my girlfriend? I would like to have the opportunity to get to know you even more and see what the future holds for us together, he said. At that moment, her heart shrank. These words triggered memories of the love she once had for Emmanuel, which now became a good memory. Arthur, I would love to be your girlfriend, Graciela said with a sparkle in her eyes. I feel a strong attachment to you, and I'm excited to see where this can take us, she concluded, smiling. After some time, Artur and Graciela married, and she became pregnant with Esteban, continuing her career in the boutique. Graciela used her experience and positive results as a manager. When her son was born, she took time off to enjoy every moment with her baby, but she also began to dream of something bigger. Inspired by Elena's business model, she decided it was time to follow her own path in the luxury industry. She did not return to Elena's shop, and although sad at the loss of an exceptional professional, she understood that Graciela had to move on. With savings and an approved loan due to her excellent work history, Graciela opened her first store a few months later, with her husband's support in balancing the care of their son, Esteban. Graciela's first boutique was modest, located in a neighborhood close to her home. She chose humble beginnings to better understand the market and build a solid customer base. Graciela was involved in all aspects of the store, from product selection to marketing and sales. She used her initial experience to improve the store concept and invest in more prestigious locations, attracting customers who valued the exclusivity and high standard of the products offered. Graciela not only followed the growth of her stores, but also her son's. Years later, Graciela became a successful businesswoman, respected in the world of luxury fashion. Her network of boutiques grew to encompass many important cities, each reflecting her commitment to quality and exceptional service. At that time, her son Esteban was already 20 years old and studying architecture. One Sunday afternoon, during a quiet conversation at home, Graciela and Esteban talked about life, their aspirations, and the journey they had traveled together. Esteban, now an architecture student, spoke reflectively about the influences that shaped his career and choices. Mom, you always showed such strength and honesty. It taught me more about life than anything I learned at university, Esteban said lovingly, taking Graciela's hand. Esteban, no matter what the difficulties, we can overcome them with hard and honest work, Graciela said with emotion. And you are the best example of that, Mom. Every time I face a challenge at university, I remember how you faced yours. Esteban smiled reflectively. The conversation continued as the evening fell, sharing laughter and memories. For Graciela, these moments with Esteban were a sweet reminder of why she had fought so hard over the years. Graciela, who was now living a happy life with her family, found herself in an unexpected situation at the cafe. Xavier stood in front of her, wearing a watch that reminded her a lot of the one Emmanuel had. She didn't know what to think, and impulsively invited him to leave the noisy cafe. Can you come with me, please? Graciela asked Xavier, who had wide eyes. Of course, my lady, he replied politely. Let's go. There's too much chaos in here, and I don't want you to be subjected to so much humiliation, she said, taking him by the arm and leading him outside. Nubia and the other customers thought Xavier was cornered, drawing energy from this malicious atmosphere. Seeing Graciela lead Xavier through the streets, heading towards the park, she asked, Mr. Xavier, can you eat your lunch now, please? Pointing to a bench where they could sit. Meanwhile, can I see your watch? I promise I'll give it back soon, she asked. Of course, my lady, Xavier replied, politely unfastening his watch and handing it over, curious about the situation. Graciela carefully took the watch with trembling hands as Xavier devoured his lunch, putting the second sandwich into his bag. She turned the watch over to examine the back, where she remembered Emmanuel's name being engraved. Seeing the inscription, A wave of emotions washed over her. There it was, just as she remembered, the name engraved in clear and precise letters, and on the side of the watch was the letter G, an addition she had requested years ago, symbolizing their love and bond. "It's really his, right?" "It was Emmanuel's watch," Graciela asked, her voice cracking with emotion. "What are you saying, lady? Emmanuel?" Xavier was surprised by this revelation. Graciela nodded, eyes brimming with tears at the memory of the past. She returned the watch to Xavier with care, gently touching the cold metal one last time. "Yes, Mr. Xavier. How did this watch come into your hands?" she asked, intrigued. "This watch belonged to my son, Emmanuel," Xavier said, with a melancholic expression on his face. "He died of complications from a car accident." He began to talk about the tragic accident, his words filled with sadness. Graciela, hearing Emmanuel's name confirming her suspicions, held back tears as Xavier continued. "At the time, his mother and I were divorced, but our son's death brought us back together in a moment of deep sadness and emotional vulnerability. Ivana, Emmanuel's mother, was inconsolable. She told me that the girlfriend he had at the time, whom I had never met in person, she was responsible for everything. Ivana never mentioned her name, but she always said that if it weren't for her, our son and our grandson would still be here," he said thoughtfully. Ivana's allegations had a lasting effect on Xavier, shaping his perception of his son's unknown girlfriend, whom he imagined as a destructive force without knowing her history. After the accident, we tried to resume our life in the capital. I had a car repair shop, but due to the loss of Emmanuel, I lost all desire to continue. In the end, I let the business fail. It was then, in a moment of desperation, that Ivana suggested that we do something to divert attention from the mind. "Unfortunately, we have engaged in a fraudulent betting scheme," he said regretfully. He continued by describing how they impulsively decided to sell the apartment they owned to finance a new start, but were mugged along the way. "The thieves took everything, including the checks, which Ivana had to withdraw under threat. We lost everything in this attack. All the money from the sale of the apartment disappeared in an instant. With no money and no home, we found ourselves living on the streets with no choice. Every day, Ivana blames herself more and more, seeing our situation as punishment for being a bad mother and not supporting her son's happiness in his last months of life," Xavier said. "Mr. Xavier, this is a lot to bear. No one should have to go through this kind of suffering," Graciela said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Yes, that's true, and the most ironic thing is that this watch is the only memento of my son. Ivana told me that he never took this watch off his wrist," Xavier said, looking at the watch with a sad smile. As Graciela heard this story, she felt the increasing complexity of Xavier and Ivana's suffering and saw how deeply words and actions from the past could impact and destroy lives. "But please tell me, lady, what is your relationship with Emmanuel?" he asked. "He was my first love. I was the girl Ivana was talking about." She began to cry. "I didn't know that memories were so strong and vivid." "Is that really you?" Xavier asked, very surprised. "God, I remember him walking through the workshop and saying that he was very happy with his new life and that Ivana was very demanding of him. Emmanuel never gave me many details of his life because, after the divorce, I drifted away from him. But his heart was huge. He always came to visit me when Ivana didn't know." She had the initial G engraved on the side of the watch, a discreet but significant reminder of her love and constant presence. "I remember him being so happy that I felt grateful for everything we had been through together. I wanted him to have something that would measure time the same way he measured my life," she sighed. Xavier was touched by this story, bringing his son closer to him. "I'm so sorry for the loss of your son, my dear. I'm sorry it took me so long to say these words," he said, wanting to take her hands but feeling too dirty to do so. "Okay, Mr. Xavier, it was a beautiful feeling, and I was very happy," she replied. "Yes, these are memories now. Let's focus on the present. Please tell me more about Ivana's life. Is she with you?" she asked with concern. He said that Ivana, consumed with guilt and remorse, saw her current situation as a form of atonement for past mistakes. She was convinced that everything that had happened was deserved punishment, adding to the couple's pain and desperation. "Emmanuel's death broke us, and everything that came after only broke us even more. Ivana thinks this is punishment for all the bad things she's done in the past, including you. I'm so sorry for everything you went through because of her," Xavier said in a trembling voice, explaining to Graciela. "Xavier, thank you for your honesty. Life throws us difficult challenges, and what you have gone through is terribly sad. Thank you for sharing this with me and for your apology. I hope we find peace somehow, Graciela replied with tears in her eyes, touched by the older man's sincerity. Xavier continued, explaining that he does what he can, asking for alms every day to get food for himself and Ivana, but not always. That's enough. Mr. Xavier, where is Ivana now? She asked. She's waiting for me under the tree we found to stop, she said worriedly. Are you sure you want to see her? I mean, everything I told you, meeting her won't hurt you? Xavier asked with concern. Calm down, Mr. Xavier, it was many years ago. I have no resentment or anger towards her. Let's go there. I want to suggest something, Graciela replied, smiling empathetically. After hearing the whole story, Graciela was deeply moved, and despite her past conflicts, she decided to reach out her hand to help Xavier and Ivani. She invited Xavier to get into her car, and they went to meet Ivana. When they got there, Graciela found Ivana, led by Xavier with a heavy heart, but determined. Ivana, Graciela said when they arrived. Ivana was surprised, looking at the woman, trying to figure out who she was. Ivana, don't you know who she is? Xavier asked, seeing that Ivana wasn't saying anything. It's Graciela, he said, sitting down next to his wife, who was looking at them both in horror. I know what we went through together wasn't easy, and I will never forget the past, but I have heard about your difficulties. I would like to help you, Graciela said, her voice as gentle but firm as Ivana remembered from the past. Graciela, my God, how much you have changed, Ivana said in awe. I don't know what to say. After everything that happened, why would you help me? Ivana asked with tears in her eyes, surprised. Because despite everything, Mrs. Ivana, I believe that everyone deserves a second chance. Life has come full circle, yes. Seeing how much you suffered, it touched me deeply. I have no regrets. I am the same Graciela, only older and more mature, she said, smiling. I'm really sorry, Graciela, for everything. Ivana began to cry. I was blinded by pain and fear, and I took it out on you, which was unfair. If I could turn back time, I know that people leave this world for a reason, and back then, because I didn't like you out of jealousy for my son, I took it all out what I felt, Ivana said, fighting back tears. Ivana, what matters now is how we choose to move on. I would like you to come live with me. My house is big. It's not charity, it's a gesture of peace, Graciela said, pausing gently. Share with you? I don't even deserve this, Graciela. I am atonement for my sins here, Ivana said, crying, and Xavier held her hand. Now is not the time for drama and stubbornness, Mrs. Ivana. Life is too short to live attached to the past. I have a proposition. Let's create new, better memories. You know, Emmanuel would be happy to see us getting along, right? And who knows? Maybe we will finally be able to heal old wounds, Graciela said, looking at them with kindness, stretching out her hands with love. Graciela called her husband and quickly explained the situation. He immediately agreed that they should help them, and that's what Ivana did. She took them to her house, showed them the guest room, and asked them to stay there. Xavier and Ivana were already about 90 years old, and out of gratitude for their love for Emmanuel, she couldn't close her eyes to this situation, seeing that Graciela was married and had a son in college. They both cried, thinking about what it would have been like if she hadn't lost her child. A week has passed. Ivana and Xavier lived well and were treated very well. Graciela's apartment was huge. She had employees to help maintain the house. Emmanuel's parents didn't know how to thank him. Dear ones, are you feeling comfortable? I hope so. This weekend my son will come home and you will be able to meet my Esteban, said Graciela, happy to share her story and be in the room with Ivana. Graciela was radiant as she shared with Ivana and Xavier the joy of having a healthy son and a university student. Esteban returned home, aware of all the family history, and greeted Ivana and Xavier with warm hugs. Ivana, obviously touched by the young man's kindness, was impressed by the depth of the bond that was developing between her and her former daughter-in-law, who had overcome so many adversities. During dinner, Graciela announced that the next day everyone would visit the orphanage where she grew up because it was a family tradition. The next morning, Arthur took the car and, with the help of his son Esteban, loaded it with gifts for the children. Upon arrival, they were warmly welcomed by the staff and children, many of whom already recognized Graciela not only as a frequent visitor, but as a figure of hope. With a smile on her face and a bag full of books and educational games, Graciela walked through the halls of the orphanage, greeting each familiar and new face with the same kindness. Visits to the orphanage reinforced her commitment to helping and inspiring new generations, while also reminding her of her roots and their importance in shaping her into the woman she is today. I invite you to leave a comment with your opinion on this amazing story. If you liked it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to support our work. There's another story on your screen now that will probably move you too. So what do you think about this story? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Your opinion really matters to me. And while you're at it, please subscribe to the channel. It would help me out a lot. But that's not all. I have something else to share with you, so click on the video that's popping up on your screen right now. I'll be waiting for you there.